Feels familiar, oddly. Yeah, it kind of does.
Sure, we've been here before.
I think so.
Right, well, welcome everyone. This is the half-hour SMPTE update. We're going to tell you what's been going on within SMPTE, and using the Mark Harrison timing prerogative, we're going to try and finish with 31 seconds to go.
Wait, I want to mess with the camera people a little bit.
Okay, go on, run. Hang on, I'll duck.
Come on, try.
There we go. Right, there we go.
Just a little payback.
You're in trouble later, mate, I can tell you. So, we've had a lot of success over the last year, the year of 2110. Woo, go 2110.
Yes.
So, Howard, where was this? What did we do? And why was it good?
This was up at Arista, or was it Santa Clara? I think we got our pictures all messed up, but nonetheless, you get the idea. A bunch of geeks get together and make standards.
And we eat an awful lot of donuts.
We do, and we drink a lot of coffee, tea.
And occasionally
crumpets.
the odd beer.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think the numbers are quite impressive because we get a lot of people turning up to these meetings. Can we have a little hands up in the audience? Who's been to a standards community meeting? Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Keep your hands up if you enjoyed it. Oh.
Okay, good. We're doing something right.
Yeah, well, like that. Maybe they've all got arthritis. I don't know. Oops, next slide. So for those of you who've been to a standards community meeting, you'll probably recognize all of these names. For those of you who haven't, this is just some information about how we organize standards within SMPTE, because it occurred to me that we've never really told non-standards people this, so it might help you understand what we actually do. So up at the top, that big red lozenge up there, that's the standards committee. That is formed of all the TC chairs, Howard, staff at HQ, myself, the SVP.
Pretty much everybody in standards who participates.
Yeah, and really, that's the oversight committee to look at everything. Now, the leadership of standards is really all to do with making certain that we have a great process so that we can do work in several specialist subject areas. And that's what the technology committees are. Howard, what's your favorite technology committee?
Mine is 10E. I seem to hang out in 10E quite a bit. Got a lot of things. Essence has to do with HDR, has to do with all kinds of good stuff in that area. 32F is another favorite of mine because it has to do with time code, and I'm all about time code, time labels. Yes.
And that Howard, what do you actually do for the standards community? I mean, you've got a job. Well, you had a job.
You had a job.
You've sadly resigned from it. But what do you actually do?
I like to say it's herding cats, mostly. Getting people to say it's and instead of the, or the instead of and. Solving problems. Basically.
So essentially, we're a due process organization, and you're the person that reminds people what that process is so that we get the job done.
Yes, and the parliamentarian, the thing I can never say, is also a big part of it.
And by parliamentarian, that involves Robert's Rules of Order. Anyone here heard of Robert's Rules of Order? Anybody read them? Anybody run their meeting according to Robert's Rules of Order?
Wow.
Anybody feel it helped?
It does. It really does help.
Trust me, if you guys have to run meetings and you haven't read Robert's Rules of Order, you're missing a trick.
Yeah.
I think there's a $2 version on Kindle.
There's one for dummies. There's all kinds of books around that thing, and you can get the big, fat, thick one.
Or you could get the one you can actually read.
Yeah, exactly.
But seriously, really, really good book, tells you how to run meetings, and that's what SMPTE does. That's how we run meetings. For some reason, I kind of like 31FS.
Yeah, that's right. The MXF stuff.
Yes,
right.
I have no idea.
I avoid it like the plague.
Yeah, most people try to, I can tell you. So on Wednesday, it was a good day. We announced the continuation of the new specifications process, and the Digital Production Partnership handed our first trial, our first working draft that we're going to try and put through this specifications process. And I thought it was worthwhile just this morning just giving you a little insight into the difference between how you make a specification and how you make a standard.
This is very new for us, brand new. The project that we're doing with DPP is a pilot project. So we're kind of doing it as with training wheels on first.
Absolutely.
Seeing how it works, and then come NAB, we should take the training wheels off and go full-fledged ahead.
Absolutely, and there's a significant chance that at this presentation next year we'll go, remember that workflow we had? Well, we had to change it because the trial proved that we didn't know what we were talking about. I don't think that'll be the case, but you never know.
You never know.
So basically, specification, you start with a project, you've got this great idea, you want to turn it into a specification. First thing you do is you write a requirements document. So as an SVP, I would like all the requirements to be testable. That's a user story, and actually is the #1 user story in the whole specifications process. Once you've done your requirements, the requirements should meet the scope of your project, and the specifications director receives the scope of the project before the project starts. So you've got your requirements. This is the problem to be solved, basically. You've got all the requirements, and then you can start writing your technology. But what about this public review thing? What should we do with that?
Well, I think we already just did that. It was published out on the website, and now folks can go out to the DPP's website, look up the very two first specifications that are out there, and provide comments. Those comments then get brought back into the fold, reviewed, and addressed or not addressed, or depending upon the comment and what it does to the specification.
And that's the thing. Some of the comments will be out of scope, some of them will be in scope, but essentially, you've got some scrutiny to try and make your project a better project.
This is very similar to what the ATSC does and what AES does. They actually put them out. Now, SMPTE standards don't go out for public comment, so they kind of stay closed within the house until we're all done, and then we throw them out there. And then we get comments.
Then we get comments back here. So this is one of the big differences. We want to try and get public scrutiny so that we can move faster, socialize the specifications faster. So once you've done your technology specification, you should address all of those requirements. And part of the requirements document will actually be this requirement is addressed in this bit of the technology specification, or not addressed for particular reasons. And if you don't address it, or that requirement's not fulfilled, you have to explain why it wasn't fulfilled. And that's part of the process. You then go out for public review with your technology spec to get comments back on the goodness of your documentation and whether or not you've met your various requirements. And at that point, well, if you've addressed all the comments for both documents, you should be ready to go. But there's that final little check. This is the bit that means it's a SMPTE specification. We go through, we scrutinize, we make certain that you've declared all your IP, that there's no antitrust problems, there's no discussion of prices or competitive stuff, all those things that would fail a European Union anti-competition rule or an FCC anti-competition, can't speak this morning, competition rule. We check for all of that stuff, and if it's all clean and you followed the process, at that point, everything gets published, both documents get published, the requirements and the specifications, and that will be the end of your specification.
And the little bit of the check also has to go back to look at the original idea. In the specification group, there really is two tracks, a business track and a technical track. Until you get those requirements well defined in the business track, you don't start to work in the technical track.
Absolutely.
This is different than what we do in the standard side.
It's very different. Yes, your requirements say, I want an iPhone X, and what you build is an Apple Newton. Yeah. Go back, try again.
Try again.
Now, this is different for standards. So the standards process is well documented. You can download the standards operation manual 3.1 off the internet. It's freely available, and you can read it to help you sleep on that long-haul flight that you're going to be going on later on today. Same start. You start a project. You've got an idea. You write a scope. You go into the technology committees and ask for that scope to be vetted, that it's a proper project and SMPTE is the right home for it. You then form a drafting group. The drafting group will start to write that document and iterates around until you feel that the document meets that scope. The document then gets reviewed in a technology committee. So there's a 2-week review period where the closed technology committee reviews the document. And then you have your first vote. And that's when the fun and games start. In fact, that's when you get really busy, Howard.
That's when I get busy. Actually, I get busy when it gets to the comment resolution and two people don't agree in the comment resolution.
So do you want to explain a little bit what the ballot process is?
So the ballot process in the FCD is the final committee draft, is what it's called. And that's the point where people actually comment on the technical and the editorial part of the standard that's being done, or the recommended practice or the engineering guideline. Once that is finished and the ballot is closed, then the document editor and the drafting group chair get everything together and address each one of the comments. That process can take a little bit of time, especially if you have a lot of disagreements on how you solve the problems in the comments.
I believe it took 3 years for MXF.
Yeah, well, you had a 300 and some odd page document.
There were some pages in it.
I think you brought the pain on yourself.
My fault.
You can have other documents, however, small ones. C4ID, I think, is one that comes to mind, or maybe there was another one that had no comments whatsoever. If you get that through the pipeline, you actually pass a couple of steps and go directly towards the publishing part.
Like a game of snakes and ladders.
Yes.
You get your special discount ladder. So in theory, once you've addressed all of those comments, you will have updated the document to address those comments, and there is a chance that in those updates you broke something. And that's what this sort of next little stage is. So the first vote we called a ballot, but the next thing is what we call the DP vote. The document is in the final committee draft state, and we take a vote to elevate it to draft publication. And this is just a final check to make certain that in fixing all of those comments, we didn't introduce something new. And you know what? Very often, something new does appear because once you've read your own document 300 times, it's a little hard to actually see what you've written. You read what you think you wrote. It's a common problem.
Yep.
So at that point, you have your DP vote. If that passes, which it normally does, you then have to audit that we followed our due process.
And this is the small group of the technical committee chairs that are in this standards committee that actually review the process to make sure nobody sidestepped it, ran around the rules, did anything that was outside of the due process. So once it passes that, then it goes on to the final leg, which we handed off to Carissa at headquarters to be published.
Do you want to just explain how it gets published, that last little bit where it goes on IEEE Explore, metadata and that kind of stuff, because that helps people search?
Yeah. Basically, the document goes into our publishing technician that we have at headquarters, Carissa. She forms it into the standard templates that we use. We gather up the metadata that goes along with it, and we pass it on through a couple of steps into the IEEE library. Once they get that, then they put it in the publish. So there's about a 2-week process for the publishing side of things. And then Carissa sends out a lovely note to everybody saying that come and get it. It's out there.
And you can hear the silent punching in air over email as people celebrate. So what do we actually publish, Howard?
So we publish a couple of things, and you can see them on the top row up there. ST stands for a standard. A standard is a rigid, you shall do this, and you shall do it this way in order to have interchange. On a recommended practice, it's, well, if you should do these things, because if you do, you're going to have a good chance of interchanging your content between these two pieces of gear. Small examples. Engineering guideline is basically, you know what, here's a couple of things that you really should pay attention to if you're looking at these series of documents or want to do something of interconnection, things like that. And then we have the RDD, which is the Registered Document Disclosure. This is a proprietary document that goes through a due process just to check I need coffee again. It's too early. It's a proprietary document usually that's brought in that people want to actually encompass something that they do all the time. It gets a peer review basically, and then it gets published after that. And then the ER is an engineering report. These are things like when we studied UHD, the study group report on HDR, and also a study group on, I forgot the last one that we did, time code.
Time code, our favorite subject.
Our favorite subject. Why did I say? And then the last one is the new one that we've come up with, the SP, which is the specification.
And I was asked probably about 6 times yesterday, what's the difference between an RDD and a specification? Well, they've got slightly different processes, and an RDD is really designed for stable technology that someone's had in the field for a while that you just want to tell people about. You might have a cartridge format, or you might have done some metadata to describe your immersive audio and released it into the universe.
Or if you're Apple and you don't want to put ProRes into a standard, you do an RDD.
And describe the entire ProRes bitstream, RDD36, and how to put it into MXF, RDD44, and how to put it into IMF, RDD45. But really,
now diving down.
Yeah, sorry, I'm put my propeller hat back on the thing. But an RDD is really about describing something that you've unleashed onto the universe, and you really just want to tell the world in a publishable way and get SMPTE to remember it for a long time. Whereas a specification, as we described on Wednesday, was much more about either an early stage process where you're trying to get something into the industry, but you're not quite certain whether it's fully baked, but you want to socialize it and get people to be able to do implementations. Or maybe you're doing delivery specs or business constraints of existing standards. For example, apparently there's some countries in the world that use fractional frame rates.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but in sane countries, you might want to limit the specifications to only use integer frame rates and do those kinds of constraints. So the specifications are really all about early stage technology and constraining things, where an RDD is optimized for really telling people about some technology that you've already unleashed.
Another thing a specification can do, and actually is something like a delivery requirement, where you're going to pick and choose through a bunch of standards, and you want to write that into a formal document that will allow people to understand exactly what you're doing and delivering things. So it goes kind of both ways. You can start with early technology, become a standard at some point in time, or you can cherry pick things in standards that you want as a specification.
Absolutely. So after each of the standards block meetings, last year we initiated a standards webcast where we take about 90 minutes to explain what went on in the standards community meetings. And one of the things we did this time round, other than bounce jokes off each other to try and lighten the mood a bit, because the subject matter can be a bit dry, was to ask the audience what do you really want from these standards webcasts? Because we could just read out the minutes verbatim in the webcast, and that would be pretty tedious.
We kind of did that in the past.
We have kind of done that in the past, but we felt we weren't adequately serving the people who wanted to find out what's going on in the standards community. So basically we said, would you like us to give this exhaustive list, or do you want us to do an in-depth dive in, for example, 2110, for example? Or do you want a kind of high-level overview about, say, how is HDR implemented in each of the different SDI, IP, file format? What's the impact of HDR on these different things? And surprisingly, the answers were, we want all of those, thank you very much. It was like 33%, 34%, and 32%. So that's what we're going to do. So we asked the question of the TC chairs. We said, is there anybody who would like to volunteer to help us do one of option 2 or option 3? And only John Hurst didn't correctly understand the question and was left standing while everybody else stood backwards.
I think we said, anyone have a driver's license? And John Hurst raised his hand. Good, you're in.
So thank you, John, for being voluntold that his technology is the one that we're going to look at next time. So the next block meetings are in March, and just after that, we'll be doing a 30MR, the metadata and registers group. We're going to do a deep dive into the SMPTE metadata registers. So we will literally be reading a dictionary to you.
Yes. It shall be exciting. Please join us.
I felt that there wasn't as much positive enthusiasm coming back.
Dictionaries.
It is
Friday morning. There we go. We have a few fans. There we go. Let's hear it.
3 dictionary enthusiasts. Simulator, I'll give you a prize. But really, this is actually very, very exciting because we have given away, SMPTE has given away for free all the data. There's an API endpoint. You can pull the data down in your applications and in your tools for all the registered numbers in every element of MXF, VANC data, every IMF file, the stuff that gets buried in private data streams that have been registered with SMPTE. You can pull all of that. Schemas. All of that stuff is available for free on the SMPTE website.
And a big shout out to BBC for really doing the heavy lifting to get this thing going. So there's a lot of work that was done behind the scenes. I think we said it was a project that would take 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Took 2 years.
Took 2 years. But it was an enormous amount of work. So we're going to talk about, what are the SMPTE metadata registers. We'll actually go through individual registers to explain what they are and why they're important, not just to vendors, but to QC departments, to support teams, and in an operational environment, how using these registers can help you get to the reason why 2 bits of kit aren't talking to each other and get the vendors speaking properly. And then we'll even look at how you might want to submit stuff. We're getting into an increasingly automated and data-driven world. Whether you're a content owner, an operator, or a vendor, you're going to want to register an identifier of some kind to say, hey, this stuff's mine, and I want to use it this way in this workflow. And SMPTE provides registration mechanisms that allow you to do that. So we'll talk through a little bit about why this is important, because if you're going to be a highly automated facility, you're going to have at least some understanding of how this works. And SMPTE is the registrar for all this kind of data, not just the pro media space, but also for some consumer registers.
Yeah. And since we've been around 100 years, we think we might be around another 100 years. So we'd love to host your metadata schemas, et cetera.
Absolutely. So where are we meeting next, Howard?
We're actually going to meet for, which we haven't done in a long, long time. I actually found out we did do it once in our past 100 years, but we're going to be at White Plains at the headquarters in New York.
SMPTE headquarters.
We have a brand new office, and we have a great meeting room in the downstairs, so that's where we're going to have our orange meetings, much to kind of the chagrin of some people, like, the weather's not the same as California. Well,
it was the same top of the mountain. It's cold.
Yeah, actually, it's cold here. So next one's going to be at Ryerson University in Toronto. We try to make our meetings around the globe, so we apply equal pain to everyone for traveling. The following week of that, we're back after IBC at Geneva. And then the December meeting, we did pick a rather lukewarm place, and that's with Dolby's hosting us in San Francisco. So,
which I'm sure the fog will stay away just for us.
It does in the wintertime, so actually it's a better time to go.
So just to emphasize that the importance of these meetings, there will be a drinks reception in March. There was a little party being planned in June. If you haven't had lunch in the restaurant at the top of the EBU, you are missing out on a great lunch, actually.
They treat us very well.
And Dolby's got this fantastic cinema, and they've refused to promise anything for us. But, if we apply the thumbscrews...
I think we can. Pat Griffith's got a lot of money for his new monitor, so I'm sure he can pull some
Absolutely,
strings for us.
He's probably got 15 cents he'll share with us, yeah. So, in addition to doing the webinars, there's also a ton of data about the standards and what we've done with them on the SMPTE website. And we do get quite a lot of downloads, but not as many as I'd expected. So we give away the standards report. You can read what went on so that you don't actually have to travel around the world if you don't want to.
Yeah, I would say the level of participation, if you want to get the overall general level and get educated, the webcast is the first place to go. If you want to dive one deeper level down, I would suggest the meeting outcome reports because it has a lot more detail inside of it. And if you really want the real inside track, join us.
Join us. Particularly if you're not a middle-aged male, please, because,
Yes.
the diversity in our group is not very good, so please send your young engineers along. We desperately want a bit of diversity.
You might notice in the upcoming photos that.
Yes. So, let's have a look at your photo collection, Howard.
We shall, and seeing as Bruce does things in agile development, I think you're on, publishing out here today, revision 17.
Revision 17 of this slide
You
deck.
might find some mistakes. So this was actually from the IBC Daily. We've done, along with the EBU, IABM, so many partners I'm going to forget in here, NABA, the rest of them, AIMS. We have been participating with the IP Showcase. That's been a big hit at IBC. Started at IBC, we did it at NAB. This was IBC last year, and of course, it's going to be at NAB again this year. So please stop by and say hello, see all the cool things. This was a shot from Shanghai where we had a meeting at.
That was awesome.
Was very, very good. Of course, it wasn't as well attended. People were a little nervous at the time, but we had a great turnout. And that isn't the picture from Shanghai.
Not the picture from Shanghai.
Not the picture. So that actually was Arista in Santa Clara. So moving on. This is Shanghai, and you can tell that's our 32NF committee up there. John Snow kicking back a little bit before things work, and Friedrich doing most of the work at the time.
Yeah, it's teamwork.
Teamwork. And our illustrious president actually was on the set.
He was.
We had a really nice tours. The folks in Shanghai, SMPTE Media, treated us very, very well.
It was like being royalty. It was absolutely amazing.
And then we moved on to Sky in London for the following meeting. So, of course, they feed us very well, take good care of us. Pasties, everything. And this was the crowd then that was at London. We had quite a good turnout. This was right after IBC.
And despite what you think about England, that is actually sunlight coming in through the windows. That's not an optical illusion.
Real sunlight.
Real sunlight. Yeah. We had the one sunny day for our meetings. It was good. So SMPTE is not just about standards, although go standards is all I can say. It's all about members, and we have lots and lots of sections, and the sections are putting on a fantastic range of events this year. So we've got the Florida Technical Conference, which takes place in December, Bits by the Bay in May, the Toronto Boot Camp in June, and the Montreal Boot Camp in June. We've got some extra slides about ET 2018. And
the standards meeting up in Toronto will be right close by the boot camp. So if you're going to come for that, come for the standards too.
Absolutely, yes. Oh, we should point out that the UK region has grown a second governor because we've got so many members now. Go to the UK. The Media Forward event is in March. There's a website, mediaforward.net, I think, which is an event targeted towards students. There's also the Hollywood section is putting on an event targeted towards students. So I can tell there are not many students in this room unless they're the mature student category, but please go along and support these because the way that we get people into our industry is by experienced people like yourselves helping young students realize that there is a technology track within the media industry as well as standing in front of the camera and waffling.
And we're really looking for mentoring these young folks to get up to the people in the room have an awful lot of knowledge that needs to be passed on. Please get involved with a mentoring program if you're interested in that. You can come and see me or Bruce or Barbara or any of the SMPTE staff as well.
And please, please, please tell them, if you're under 70, please join the standards track. Really, I want some young people. I know.
We got to get that 50 group.
I'm flogging that dead horse. Sorry, HPA. Tell us about HPA.
So HPA, this is Rich Welsh has put this together and done a fine job. They're going to do it again in London. The details are up there. They've gotten, of course, a hotel, and I'm sure I hear rumors there's a bar around as well, too.
There's a bar around.
That most of the work gets done around that side of things. These are some of the topics that we'll be talking about at that HPA event. And for some reason, Rich's legs coming out of the camera.
He's shaved.
Yeah, I know. I think he did.
Beautiful.
Put
Rich.
on shoes.
Kudos, mate.
Yeah.
Kudos, Rich.
Yeah. Good show.
There's also the Future of Cinema conference at NAB, which it always clashes with one of the TV things I have to do. So I'm sure it's wonderful, but I've never been, and I'd love to one of these years.
It's a really good show. It really is, and there's a lot of good topics that are talked about in that show. It's always packed.
And there's ET 2018, which is June 13, 14. It's at Google. That's actually on the top right there.
Yeah, that's How I Shrunk Pat Griffiths.
Yeah, that's actually just an iPad, and we'll be giving away teeny tiny Pat Griffiths figurines.
Yep.
At 10
cents a piece.
10 cents a piece.
To help with his monitor fund. Absolutely. We're all helping him out with his monitor
Please
fund.
come along, because Pat needs a big one.
Yep.
TV.
TV, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we're moving ATC this year to a new location. The call for papers is out now, so please submit your abstracts. It's all on the website. I'm kind of looking forward to it, although slightly disappointed that it's too far away to cycle up the mountain, so I'll have to find something else to do. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of places to cycle. You can do the LA River.
Pretend I'm Terminator. It'll be fantastic.
Right.
So as well as membership, we also have learning resources. So the IMF course, there's the IP transport course, there's the Understanding 2110 course, and the Navigating UHD course.
And I really, really encourage you to go and check those out. Joel's done a fantastic job of putting these things together. There's a lot of source and wealth of knowledge in there to get.
And Joel got some feedback on Monday, because I gave one of the training sessions on the IMF course on Monday. And the feedback was, as a result of that training session, they solved a problem in production that day as a result of the course. So these things are, by some of the training standards, these are relatively cheap, and they're really good value done by the experts to tell you real stuff you need to do in today's operating environment.
And we got 3 minutes before we get Schubinated.
We're nearly there, actually.
Okay.
So free learning resources, we like free. It's a four-letter word that begins with F. On YouTube, we've just uploaded all of the ATC 2017 papers, so you can actually go and review papers from previous years.
And if you didn't have a chance to go, this is a great opportunity to see what was out there. Catch up.
There's also a different arrangement of those. If you go and hit the playlist tab, there's even a Bruce's short up there.
Bruce's short. What, you wearing shorts? Is that what it is?
Yeah, but the camera's only a three-quarter shot.
Right,
so
that's because you can get away with it.
Well, I don't want to show my legs off the way Rich does. It's not good.
True.
So, and finally, Howard's resigned. Yeah, so there is a job spec. We've had 4 people apply already during the show. If you are interested, please get in touch really, really quickly. Please could we give Howard a fantastic round of applause for all the wonderful work that he has done. Go, Howard.
Thank you.
And last but not least, SMPTE has prepared this fantastic book. There's one that you can look through sort of out there somewhere, but it is truly a wonderful and very, very heavy, weighty, generous gift to all of your loved ones. It's a great read. Please go and have a look at it. Please place your orders. It can ship worldwide. It is truly a wonderful tome. So Magic and Miracles available to order and to buy now.
And if you notice, it's $59.94 for members.
Yes.
It really should be $74.25 for the non-members.
This is a good audience.
Yeah.
I had to explain that to my children like 80 times before they understood. Never mind. That's us. Thank you very much for listening. We'll take probably half a question.
Yep.
I think we got the Mark Harrison timing absolutely right.
I think we did, yeah. That we have one back
Oh, it's
there.
one at the back.
Oh, Mr. Griffiths, yeah. Of course.
Yes. I think we're in trouble.
I think
We are, yeah.
Bruce did want me to mention yesterday, after Michelle Munson was unceremoniously cut off and didn't get to finish the presentation, we've decided at ET we will have a session with John Hurst on how to create an IMF file in detail, which will then be used as an example by Michelle for their new proposal. So should be a landmark event.
And I think we should have set up an IMF drinking game, because the many times I've heard IMF through this whole program at HPA, we'd be totally blitzed
wasted,
by
yes.
the end of this.
But we'd have to have the drinks in components. So
That's right. No, that's right. Yeah, here's a track file. Here's a track file.
They didn't laugh at that as much as they laughed at the time code one. Never mind. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.